Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Your Excellencies, delegates and friends. Welcome to the discussion on the economy of well-being as a lens to accelerate the achievement of the Agenda 2030. This informal side event is organized by the Finnish government. As you all know, our section joins the 2021 UN High-Level Political Forum, which is an annual platform for follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Ministers and delegates discuss ways to ensure a sustainable and resilient recovery from COVID-19 that puts us on track to assess the progress made to achieve SDGs by 2030. Our deliberation will focus on well-being. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 crisis has shown us that there is more to life than money. What really matters is the well-being of the people, particularly those who are at least satisfied with their lives. This should be the basis for the government to reset its vision for a post-COVID world, including economy. I will be your moderator. My name is Mihai Köki. I'm a medical doctor, a former Hungarian politician, having served as Minister for Welfare, later Minister for Health in left liberal governments. In the international arena, I assisted WHO for more than 3 decades. I was also member and chairman of the executive board of WHO. Currently, I am WHO consultant on health promotion, in addition to lecturing and writing on global health diplomacy. Today, we will hear from a number of speakers who will share their views on a horizontal approach that takes human well-being as a point of departure for sustainable development. The aim is to facilitate discussion on how policies on health, well-being, and the economy can mutually support each other in the context of the interconnected sustainable development goals. We will first hear opening remarks from Her Excellency Hanna Sharkkinen, Minister of Social Affairs and Health of Finland, through a recorded video.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It is my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Government of Finland to this side event in the context of the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. The Agenda 2030 and its Sustainable Development Goals form the most important framework for global development and the basis for Finland's government programme. We strive to support the Agenda 2030 implementation in all of our actions, both at home and internationally. Dear friends, the interlinkages between the economy, health and well-being is something that Finland has given a lot of thought during the past years. The COVID-19 pandemic has further underlined the importance of the promotion of health and well-being throughout different policy areas. It has also put at risk the good progress on various sustainable development goals and threatens to increase poverty and inequality. We believe that it is timely to enhance discussion about a more comprehensive approach to well-being and economy. The economy of well-being places well-being at the heart of all political decision-making and highlights the role of investments in well-being. Political decisions at all levels must be knowledge-based and driven by impact assessment. I believe that the heart of economy of well-being is to understand that the economy must serve well-being and we must respect the planetary boundaries. And dear friends, the economy of well-being is also about collaboration between decision makers, administration, civil society, academia, and the private sector. We can all benefit from discussion that brings together different perspectives. This is the very aim of today's event, to exchange views on what an economy of well-being might mean in international policy and implementation, and to explore opportunities for cooperation at the global level. Our vision is that this event could inspire the work of countries, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations for cross-sectoral well-being policy and practice. We believe that applying the economy of well-being approach promotes sustainable economic, social, and ecological development. We focus on the links between well-being, the economy, and the sustainable development goals to make sure that we are not just making quick fixes to immediate problems. We must seize the opportunity to build back better and greener, more equal, and enhanced systems that are fair, socially just, and inclusive. We know it from experience that we have to switch our thinking into investing in prevention. Investing in well-being surely pays back. Finally, I would like to warmly thank the contributing governments as well as the World Health Organization for your cooperation and contribution to today's discussion. I hope that this event will contribute to the exchange of insights on how we can better enhance well-being in all our policies, as well as bring forward the discussion at the global level. Thank you very much, and I wish you a fruitful event, and I'm very much looking forward to hear your discussion.
Dear colleagues, Minister Sharkinan presented us the idea of the economy of well-being from the Finnish perspective, highlighting the whole of government, whole of society approaches. Indeed, it seems clear that there is no one size fits all. Today's event seeks to identify and share different country perspectives to policies on well-being and the economy. There will be 4 country cases. 3 contributions will come from the health policy side. They may address the importance of health literacy, competencies, and people-centered health system. We have 1 speaker from the finance department who look at these challenges in a fiscal approach. 2 panelists represent developed economies, 2 come from developing countries. So therefore, we can trust that the diversity of perceptions will be reflected in their comments. Let me encourage our speakers to share their views in a very practical level. It would also be desirable to identify what could further benefit countries that are interested in strengthening a horizontal approach to the economy and well-being. In addition, we would like to discuss opportunities for cooperation at the global level on this agenda. Today, we have a distinguished multi-sectoral panel. First, we will hear the introduction of Mrs. Petronella Masabane, the Deputy Executive Director at the Ministry of Health, Namibia. Then we will listen to the introduction Mrs. Saila Ruuth, the State Secretary from the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, the Government of Finland. To be followed by Mrs. Alison McDermott, the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, the Department of Finance from the Federal Government of Canada. And last but not at least, the floor will be given to Dr. Roshan Pokhrel, the Chief Specialist from the Ministry of Health and Population, the Government of Nepal. You will hear a short intervention from each panelist, followed by a discussion. You can find the biographies of our distinguished panelists below on the event platform under the headline Speakers. Let me kindly ask the audience to share their remarks, questions in the chat box. Some of them will be put to the panelists in the second part of the session as time allows. However, you may put questions for clarifications right after each intervention via the chat room. And I am also happy that we will have Dr. Rüdiger Kresch from WHO, who is the Director of Health Promotion at the Division of Universal Health Coverage and Healthier Population in WHO, who will give us the closing remarks at the end of our session. So that's our agenda, that's our timetable more or less. So our first speaker is Mrs. Petronella Masabane from Namibia. The floor is given to Dr. or Mrs. Masabane.
Chairperson, I don't know, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for having me. Your Excellencies, I thank you for the opportunity to share views and experiences on the topic under discussion, which is fitting and appropriate as we face this unparalleled pandemic in recent times. As you know, Namibia is heavily affected by the pandemic. The past couple of weeks, we have seen an increased number of infections, as well as, unfortunately, a lot of people are dying. I think at the moment, it is predicted that Namibia is the worst affected country in the world. So we are indeed facing a very uphill battle. But also, we have seen that there's a lot of international solidarity with Namibia in these trying times. That is, Mr. Chairperson, the reason why our minister has delegated to this task to me to be part of this panel discussion, because he has a very important other assignment to mobilize resources and to make sure that we have the necessary equipment, commodities, and supplies in order to save lives. Mr. Chair, the pandemic has already and continue. The pandemic has already and continues to transform the way we do business in all spheres of life. 2 years ago, we would have been most likely now having this meeting face to face. But this pandemic has also more than ever demonstrated that we have been asserting for many years that access to quality health is a prerequisite and an enabler for communities to prosper in all other aspects of economic and social well-being. The pandemic has robbed many of their lives and livelihoods, indiscriminately hitting very hard on every sector of society, especially those who are economically disadvantaged, and those of older age and those facing chronic ailments. The pandemic has not brought new revelations in itself, but merely amplified what we have been stating for many years, but did not adequately address head-on. And that is the One Health concept, which is central to stakeholder engagement and participation to promote multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary approach to achieve optimal health outcomes. In recognition of this, Namibia has, prior to the start of the pandemic, made progress in the development of policies and strategies that would promote the One Health concept. I won't mention all of those tools and policies and strategies, but these are fundamental policies and strategies to enhance our collaboration and to reduce the inequalities in the health sector and promote health security, which overall would benefit human development and well-being beyond the health sector. The conversation we are now engaged in is timely as the pandemic itself provides an opportunity for rethinking our health policies and strategies. The health sector could not have had a better opportunity than now to make the case that without health, there can be no economic development, and therefore meaningful investment and transformation in the health sector is fundamental. The health sector has the potential to spur economic growth by promoting research, development, and innovation across the supply chain of commodities and services deployed for health intervention. As we now know, most of the commodities deployed in the current response to the pandemic in my country were imported, some of which could have been locally manufactured for the development of the local market. As an example, our local economy has benefited from the local production of sanitizers and face masks, which is an indication that similar production capabilities can be extended to other commodities. We have now developed an industrialization policy, a wealth creation policy, among others, to promote local manufacturing and domestic growth and address the unemployment, very high unemployment rate in our country. The government also incentivizes local industries through strategies such as infant industry protection and agricultural subsidies. Therefore, while the global pandemic is a threat in itself, it also presents opportunities through which we can reposition ourselves with a view to innovate mechanisms on how we can attain the SDGs. Mr. Chair, I trust that the deliberations from this forum will provide additional perspectives on how to accelerate the achievement of SDGs, grow our economies, and at the same time secure the well-being and the social protection of our people, all our people, but especially the vulnerable women and children. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Masabane, for sharing the experience of Namibia. And I understand that your country is still in the middle of the public health crisis. And I think I can express our full solidarity for your work, for your hard work. And I think we could just highly appreciate that you emphasize the One Health concept, the multi-sectoral cooperation, and even in this time you are thinking about the future, how to provide incentives to the local industries. So thank you very much indeed. And I can't see any question for clarification via chat box. I haven't got any of them at the moment. So we are moving now to Finland. And the next speaker will be Mrs. Saila Ruuth, who is the State Secretary from the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. Mrs. Ruuth.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Mihaly. And I totally agree with the words of solidarity towards Ms. Masabane and Namibia. Your Excellency, fellow panelists, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone joining us today, and greetings from a very warm, even hot Helsinki. I am very happy to participate in this global discussion on a theme that I find very important and timely. In Finland and globally, health inequities prevail and the risk is increasing. Climate change, digitalization, new forms of work, and aging populations put pressure on our societies. Economies will face increasing budgetary constraints, and there is a risk of losing track on achieving the health-related SDGs. As Ministeri Sarkkinen mentioned in the opening remarks, the economy of well-being has been a central policy tool for Finland for many years now. When it comes to the history of the approach in Finnish context, the economy of well-being builds on a continuum of promotion of health and well-being, starting already in the early 1970s. The health in all policies approach has guided our work for a very long time. We see that promoting economy of well-being entails potential for economic well-being, productivity, long-term fiscal sustainability, and societal stability. It is important to identify the strengths and development needs of the knowledge base and indicators for the economy of well-being. As we are gathering in the context of the high-level political forum on sustainable development, I want to underline that the SDGs can give guidance when selecting indicators to measure and evaluate economy of well-being. There is a lot of discussion right now also in the international level. Today, we are exploring how to implement this approach in practice through active cooperation. Currently in Finland, we are in the process of building the structure, culture, and evidence aiming to this end. I am very happy and looking forward to share these thoughts a little bit later on during this event. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, and thank you very much for guiding us through the Finnish history very briefly of the health in all policies, which even has originated from the famous North Karelia project started in the 1970s. And of course, it has a lot of other milestones, but it's worthwhile, to study. I can't see any emergencies in terms of questions for clarification. So now let us move to Canada. And I would like to ask Mrs. Alison McDermott, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister from the Department of Finance, to share her introductory comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's a real pleasure to be here at this event alongside all these other very distinguished speakers. So I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers for putting this together and to also express our solidarity with the people and the government of Namibia. I work as an official in the Economic and Fiscal Policy branch of the Department of Finance in Canada. That's the branch that provides advice to the Minister of Finance on the state of the economy and that coordinates the budget process in our department. We've also been helping our government fulfill a relatively new commitment to better integrate quality of life or well-being measures into budgeting and policy development. So we were at a relatively early stage in that work when the COVID crisis hit in March 2020. So we were, of course, quite distracted by the need to do like a lot of economic analysis and help introduce a range of economic supports to address the crisis. But we did continue to advance our well-being work. And in many ways, we found that work to be quite synergistic with our COVID response work and indeed helpful in informing that response. And I think this just reflects that the well-being approach, as was described by our colleague from Finland, it does tend to stress aspects of policy development that are quite relevant in this COVID context. For example, the importance of integrating like a broad range of factors that affect quality of life and decision making, not just looking at economic factors, but broader health, societal, environmental, governance factors. It wasn't about choosing between health or the economy either. It was really about recognizing the importance of both and integrating a broad integrating the two together and making sure that they were both reflected in planning. And it was about understanding that addressing the health crisis was and still is the best way at the time to strengthen our economy. So the well-being approach also tends to place a lot of emphasis on looking at distributional impact. So not just looking at the national average, but focusing on individual groups and how certain groups in the country are faring across a range of dimensions. So that was actually very important as well in a COVID context, because the impacts of COVID were very unequally felt, at least they were in Canada. So we had women, for example, and youth and racialized individuals that tended to be disproportionately affected given the types of jobs they have and the types of sectors they work in, and the caregiving responsibilities of women in particular. So this focus on individual impacts tended to help, or at least allowed us to ensure that our COVID response was sensitive to these kinds of impacts. And finally, this approach also stresses kind of long-term thinking and preventative approaches and emphasizes resilience. These are now important principles for us that are informing our kind of recovery approaches and our Building Back Better plans. So I believe in a similar way that this well-being approach to policy development can also help us achieve our SDG objectives through a kind of a holistic and integrated approach to policy development, as well as a greater focus on distributional aspects and a focus on long-term thinking. So just as I won't go into details, we can talk more in the future, but just to note that many of the issues and challenges around health and poverty we know are very interconnected. So a well-being approach is stressing the need to get beyond sort of silos, individual ministries, and consider the kind of interventions that are most effective at getting at the root causes. And they also focus on interventions that can address more than one objective synergistically, such as investments in maternal health and reproductive rights, which we know advance health and poverty reduction at the same time, while also advancing equality and sustainability. So I'll stop there, but I look forward to further discussion as we continue this chat.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McDermott. I think it was really, really very important to hear that for Canada, and I hope that for many other countries, in such a public health crisis, how important it is to highlight or to understand and apply the distributional aspects. Otherwise you cannot address the inequalities. And it was so good to hear it from you, from a financial expert. So I'm very glad, that I would think that it could really be a very important entry point for our further discussions. So again, thank you very much. I can't see any question for clarification. So let us move to our fourth speaker. Last but not least, let me call upon Dr. Roshan Pokrel, the Chief Specialist from the Ministry of Health and Population in the government of Nepal. So, Dr. Pokrel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Your Excellencies, colleagues from WHO, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and namaste from Nepal. I'd like to thank the Finnish Ministry of Social Affairs and Health and the World Health Organization for organizing this important side event and for having me as a panelist. The Ministry of Health and Population and I personally feel privileged to be speaking on this event. I agree with my earlier speakers that the well-being is a positive construct which involve economic growth, but more importantly, human development and meaningful functioning with subjective satisfaction with life. To promote well-being, people's basic needs to be surely met, but at the same time, their dignity needs has to be upheld high. Nepal's development policies and framework have adopted a well-being at the center of focus. The focus bottom-up approach in program development and implementation has been heart of the recent federal system of government. Federal, provincial, and local as the traditional unitary system of government, and with it introduce substantial devolution of power to lower level of government. The municipal government elected by the people have a full authority to plan and implement activities on their own within the framework of federal governments. This is a historic shift in recent times and is expected to solve local problems by the local communities. Now of COVID-19. COVID-19 has definitely affected us. Now we are in the second stage of it and we are easing lockdown. This has definitely shows us how inadequate our infrastructures were, and it has led to around 0.9% death of the affected. But this has given us an opportunity to enhance our overall health infrastructure, and for the first time this year, the budget in health sector has crossed around 7%. So this is a very significant finding to us, but unfortunately, it definitely has affected us. Similarly, COVID-19 has definitely halted our developmental plans, but the government is desperately trying to overcome it and continue with the health policies and plan in order to achieve SDGs by 2030. Nepal has definitely made significant progress in poverty reduction and human development in the last 2 decades. Despite protracted political instability, absolute poverty decreased from 42% in 1995 to 25% in 2010 and further to 21.6% in 2015, resulting in improvement of the Human Development Index. Still, 1 in 5 Nepalese live in absolute poverty, among the highest in South Asia, and the country is at the bottom of the countries with middle human development status. The caste-based discrimination, gender-based violence is still prevalent in the communities. Similarly, the women empowerment is another big area for Nepal to demonstrate progress. This has definitely resulted in considerable gap in the expectation of the communities from the government and national system, which has affected the relationship and trust in the systems. I think this is the biggest issue to work on in the coming days. Only then the aspirational goals of health and well-being can be achieved. I thank you very much once again and will continue in the panel so that the discussion goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pokhrel. And thank you very much for your short review in progressing with the well-being measures in your country. And I understand that there is a long way to go, to be satisfied with all of this. Thank you really very much. And again, I can't see any urgent question for clarification. So everybody was clear with the introduction. So thank you very much for this. So now let us move to some of the questions. First of all, let me turn to all of you, and you may answer, in any order you want, and then of course I will have some specific country questions. But first, let me start with the following. I'm sure, and we have heard examples that creating and implementing well-being driven economic policies belong to unmapped areas in the governance of many, many countries. You have started your path, but it's still a long way to go. So what do you advise for other member states? How this approach could be made acceptable for policymakers, for businesses, and the society as a whole? So you may start, any of you may start with your response. Please. Please indicate who is going to start. Yes, from Canada. Yes, yes, there is a sign. So, McDermott, can I just say Alison to be?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Alison,
I'm
please.
happy to go first with a few points. I would just maybe mention that, and this is fresh in our minds because, as I mentioned, we're really just building this approach. I would say one of the principles that has really driven our approach to developing what we call our quality of life framework is that our framework, which is intended to help guide decisions about priorities and budget investments in the future, it's really based on evidence of what will most improve quality of life and the well-being of Canadians and what Canadians themselves identify as their priorities. And this was important for us because we felt we needed a way to think differently about some of the complex problems that we're trying to solve. So because the approach that we're taking is inherently evidence-based, we were able to lean on those that had been thinking about these issues for much longer than we have. So to learn from experiences of other countries, including, for example, Finland, we did a lot of consultation with experts, with organizations like the OECD, and engaged our partners and other levels of government in the development of this work. But we also knew that in order to be a successful framework that is acceptable to policymakers and businesses and the civil society in Canada, that it needed to reflect the priorities of people across the country as well, something that people can see themselves in. So we've also done a fair bit, and we're still doing that, of engagement with Canadians. So things like surveys and focus group testing to find out what Canadians consider important to their quality of life and their well-being. And we made sure that we incorporated that into our framework. So I think this approach of having kind of relying on evidence, but also kind of, and that I think leads you to a bit of a universal approach to quality of life, but then also having some interactions with individuals and with Canadians to get a sense of, what needs to be maybe Canadian specific about this, has really contributed to the acceptability and the credibility of this for people. At least we hope that it will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Other panelists, yes, I see the hand of our colleague from Namibia. Yes, please. Go ahead. Petronella, yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to maneuver here. Here, it's not so hot like in Finland, so the fingers are a bit stiff. Okay, now while we are dealing with this devastating pandemic, and a lot of focus is on saving lives and just getting us through this. We are also recognizing that, services, life goes on for the majority of people. We have to continue providing services. We have to find ways of still engaging our people, making sure that their other needs are met as it is outlined in our social protection strategy. We are also preparing ourselves for economic recovery and for healing the wounds that and the trauma that will be caused and that this pandemic is causing amongst our people. We have come up with economic and social and economic recovery plan strategy, and it has 5 pillars. I will not go through all the details, but I will just touch a little bit on what we are planning to do during this pandemic, but also thereafter. The first pillar is health first, and that is what I alluded to in my opening remarks. It is to have to put in place a One Health regulatory system, and also an integrated health management information system, so that we are not caught unaware, that we have proper surveillance systems in place and information systems in place that can alert us on how we are doing in the health and the socioeconomic sectors, so that we can timely respond to any situation. Very important, and that is the foundation of our health system, is one. More than ever, we were reminded that we have to improve our primary healthcare services across the facility and invest in primary healthcare services. The second pillar is protecting people. We have a very good social protection program in place already, and we have now a very robust social protection policy, and the service we keep on delivering the services. Did we not have this well-established social protection systems in place, like universal old age grants, disability grants, children's grants, funeral policy, funeral benefit schemes, all those are non-contributory. If we did not have that in place, our people would have been tremendously affected. Their livelihoods, the little that they have, would have been wiped out. But we need to continue to invest in our social protection systems. Then also what we need to do is to design employment generation and economic empowerment initiatives for women, the youth, and the informal sector workers. We were reminded during this pandemic about the critical role that the informal economy plays. All along, you take it for granted, walking past a woman who's selling tomatoes and so on. Suddenly, during lockdown, when that was stopped, we realized how many households were affected, how many people had nothing at all. Mr. Chairman, please feel free to stop me if time is running out. So basically, the second pillar is about formalizing the informal economy and protecting those ones who are working in the informal economy, because they are really the backbone of keeping households going and securing livelihoods in the rural setting and in vulnerable households. The third pillar is about economic recovery, response, and recovery. We are looking, and already it is in place now, it is issues such as loan repayment, holidays, collateral-free credit to medium and small enterprises, so that they can rebuild their enterprises and postpone single borrowing limits. We are looking at monetary and fiscal policies to support economic diversification and structural transformation of the economy beyond the traditional sources of growth, such as fishing, mining, etc. in Namibia. And then develop innovative, gender-sensitive financing instruments for women, young people, and vulnerable communities. Lastly, and very importantly, is the pillar on social cohesion and community resilience. Here we are talking about ensuring that government service providers like social and community care workers have resources for alternative service provision, and that sustainable development methods of production to protect the environment while increasing economic growth for the well-being of citizens. And lastly, support capacity building of national institutions, local authorities in the areas of planning, financing, coordination, and crisis management in sectors such as education, health, agriculture, etc. In doing so, the private sector, the civil society organizations, and a one government approach will be able to pull us through the drift that we are in now, but also take us forward to recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry. Thank you very much indeed. I think you have been really very, very rich in offering us certain areas, certain interlinked areas of action. So we are very grateful. If this is the case, that you have so rich way of thinking that time is not so important in that way. So, before moving to, if they would like, of course, it's not compulsory to contribute, colleagues from Finland and from Nepal, maybe you could just, I would say something, because it's also important when you have such a multifaceted actions. You can tackle that. How do you think? What can leaders do to contribute to creating an economy of well-being? Because that type of very diverse and multifaceted but still interlinked activities in a government really needs a strong leadership, as I assume. So you may comment on this as well. So I see that the hand of Dr. Pokarel is up, and then I will move to Finland. Okay, Dr. Pokarel, what is your brief comment on this?
Thank you, sir. I won't take very long. This is an opportunity for Nepal to learn from Finland, Canada, and definitely Namibia. So our policies, right now we are more concerned to prioritize our policies to the needy ones. And we want to know how do we involve the marginalized, the underprivileged, and the so-called the lower castes, women, elderly, and we are worried about their well-being during this time. So, and we are also worried about the equitable distribution, especially of the human rights and their health. So this has led us to rethink about our certain policies, especially about the migrant workers. We have around 2 million migrant workers from Nepal going to work in India, and around 2 million working outside, like in the Gulf regions. So we are definitely concerned about their well-being and about their health during this time of pandemic. And this pandemic has made us, led us to a very difficult compromise between health and economy. How do we prioritize health, or how do we prioritize economic at this time? While prioritizing economy, we are losing health, and while we are prioritizing health, then we are losing the economy. So this dilemma has led us to a very confusing stage in some of our policies. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very relevant, although brief comment. And I also appreciate that you brought up the problem of migration and the problem of migrant workers, because will be a major challenge for many of the countries in the world in the years to come. And thank you very much also for, in a way, responding to my question of the leadership, because then you tackled the problem or the dilemma. You always have to make priorities, and sometimes it is not easy, to make the balance, or the cooperation between health and economy, and to find, some jointly beneficial and politically acceptable solutions in the country. So that's, I think, also very important challenge for the leaders in the governments. So then last but not at least, could I just ask Saila, Shaila or Saila? Sorry. Okay.
Okay, it's Saila.
Saila, okay.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the question, and I'll begin maybe with the leadership. And we've talked already quite a lot about the evidence-based approach and trying to get data, use all sorts of indicators, and through that way, sort of like prove that we have these policy actions that are really efficient. But I also want to draw the attention to the political level of this whole thing, that this is not only about proving with data and science and knowledge. It's also political discussion, and one thing that political leaders can do and have to do and must do is to participate actively in the political public discussion and debate and sort of like justify the idea, because it's so deep in our system to think that economic growth is the way to ending poverty or enhancing health or well-being in general. And I think this is the thing that we need to do, not only inside the administration, but publicly with the people, with societies in the public discussion, to make the point and justify the idea that we have to be brave enough to invest in people, in education, in health, in ending poverty, with all these different ways of improving equality between genders and between different groups of people. They are all actions that have to be done in order to gain better success also in the economic field. But also just a brief point on what can member states do and where to get inspiration. I think these international institutions and different fora is very important when you need to get some ideas of what to do next, how to go along. One thing is OECD. It's building up the Center of Wellbeing, Inclusion, Sustainability and Equal Opportunity, called the WISE Center. That's something to be followed, I think. Very interesting. I really am eager to be part of that development. And also WHO is now playing a very important role in this discussion of well-being, economy of well-being. So I'm really much looking forward also to the Council on the WHO Council on the Economics of Health for All, and all these different forums that are dealing with this topic. So that's something that concretely we can all do, that we join not only the national discussion, but also the international discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Saila. And then I see that Petronella has raised her hand. You may wish to add something. Yes, please, go ahead. I mean, you have to be unmuted.
Thank you very much. On the issue of leadership, what leaders can do, just my take, something that I really advocate for in our country. As you know, we are a very small population. And if you have 50 people die in a day for weeks, then you know that each and every one of us are losing friends, colleagues, relatives on a daily basis. On a daily basis, a colleague dies, or somebody you know, your neighbors and so on. So this is a traumatic experience for us. And because of the COVID-19 safe burial practices, you cannot go and bury your loved one like we used to. 2 weeks, we have services every day, hundreds of people attending. Now it is limited to 10 people. And most of the families, they don't even have, in the nuclear family, there are more than 10 people. So who is going and who's not going? What I'm trying to say is our people are scarred. Our people is traumatized. The psychological well-being, the mental health well-being of our people is at risk. We can't mourn our dead. We can't be there. So this will continue for a long time, not only for now, but the next generation and even after that, because that is just the African way of doing things. That's our mourning practices and rituals. Those are our psychological interventions in dealing with grief and trauma. So what I want from our leaders and the leaders of the world is to inspire hope, give people hope, inspire hope, look after while we are looking at all types of economic recovery issues and even health, we need to inspire hope, and our leaders need to give us that hope that we will also overcome this. And we as civil servants, as the private sector, business sector, as community organizations, we have to foster resilience. But mostly our leaders must, in their doing, in their actions, in their words, in the way they are reaching out to people, they must give us hope. I thank you.
Thank you very much for these really, I would say, deep thoughts and inspiring thoughts in many ways. So thank you really very much indeed. And that leads us to my question to you, as originally planned, but I think you have more or less answered this question, but you might wish to add something, because I originally wanted to ask you that we have all learned, and we all know that you are still in a very, very difficult situation. You are still facing an upward trend of coronavirus cases and deaths, as you have told us. And then I really wanted to ask that what motivates you in this dramatic situation to have a kind of vision of well-being for the economy. And you have said that you always have to provide certain hope for the people, for the public, to think about the new ways, new paths, innovations, etc. in politics, to a little bit, I would say, think in a different way. But you might wish to add something else. So I don't want, to answer the questions put to you. So please, Petronella.
Thank you very much. That is a very emotional question. If I have to tell you personally, what drives me is the desire to see every day that we are managing to save a life or some lives. Having run out of oxygen in most of our hospitals and having to work around the clock to try and get oxygen so that people can breathe. That and being able to manage that, being able to get so lot. I worked with my teams. We have mobilized so much support. The outpouring of love to Namibia, that makes me to wake up in the morning, and I'm just thankful that I can wake up in the morning and that I have woken up in the morning, and that I can be of service to my people. Yeah. Let me stop there. But yeah, we have to remain strong. We have to make sure that no matter what, this is the time that we have to live up to the promises that we have made our people all along, since before independence, that this is one Namibia, one nation, and that no Namibia should be left out. Every Namibian count. So for us as government officials, as politicians and leaders, we have to live up to that promise. And that makes me go, and because I believe that we shall overcome. This is the land of the brave. That is what is stated in our national anthem. It's the land of the brave. We have overcome a lot of adversities. We shall overcome again. We will not give up. Soldiers don't give up. We will soldier on. And we are, even if usually I would say that if you plan as a soldier, if you plan in the trenches, then you are about to fail. This time around, I say, even if it means planning in the trenches, we should do every day everything that we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petronella, and it's difficult to add anything else. I just admire your words, your commitments, your inspirations, and your ability, to think in such a way. So thank you very much. And I think that a couple of other countries and fellow countries will listen to this. And I think that maybe one of the message could really be that in such a situation, although we try, to understand that why well-being is important, to give hope for the people of the countries, but maybe sometimes assistance, support is necessary from other countries who could afford to do this. So that's from my side. Thank you really, Petronella, very much. And then I must now move to Finland. We have a specific question. If we have to a little bit speed up, not too much, but a little bit, that in the process of planning and implementing well-being policies, what would be the mechanisms and means of establishing better interactions among the different sectors? You have a lot of experience about it. And in particular, it would be interesting that how do you interact with the Ministry of Finance and bring your concerns and findings to them? So Saila, if you could have your brief advice on this.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to share our way of organizing this whole work, and I'm not sure that if we are talking really about the economy of well-being, that if we are very far away with this whole process and working, but I'm happy to tell what we have done so far. So the first thing is that we have developed this multi-sectoral structure, first of all, like a steering group of different ministries and all different actors. And that steering group aims to develop the welfare economy thinking as a tool for decision making and policy action, and not only in the national level, but also in the regional level, local level, and in the international level. And in the process of preparing a national action plan, that's one thing that we are doing to integrate the economy of well-being into decision making and the various processes in the government, so that the steering group is very wide and started its action maybe this year, in the beginning of this year. And there is also sort of like a smaller group of the Public Health Advisory Board called, and that's very concrete board that is acting and working with the different health and equity issues, and also relating those thoughts to the SDGs. And they are sort of like helping to build up the concrete agenda for the steering group. And as I mentioned, we are preparing a roadmap so that we could strengthen the economy of well-being thinking in Finland, and also the actions nationally and internationally and in the local and regional level. And then we have a government-funded research project. The aim is to showcase the enhancements and use of data and indicators. And the objective is to produce a proposal for a model of steering, a very concrete way of handling and steering, and all the indicators that would be suitable and useful when doing all the political decisions, so that, for example, we are doing a very big and wide social security reform, so that what is the way of steering this economy of well-being approach in that. And also a wider way of creating different kinds of governance models. We are watching to other countries using, for example, the BEGO network Wellbeing Economy Governance Network, so that we can sort of like take examples from other countries and other governance models and learn from them. And I could also mention in the end here that the EU has this resilience and recovery plan, and we are using also that mechanism, the EU money to create a database to enhance the impact assessment on health and well-being as part of the major social and health service sector, the healthcare reform that is also on the way now in Finland. And so we are attaching that mechanism also to the well-being of economy processes. And as I mentioned already earlier, I think this international level discussion is very important, and we are trying as much and as actively as possible to also be part of the international discussion. So those are my concrete plans, or the way that we have been now thinking that how we can organize these actions and this whole work. So different groups getting together, all the major opponents and stakeholders to the same table to discuss with each other and to build this whole steering model and mechanism together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saila. It's for your insights. This was really very much encouraging and useful. Now I would like to turn to Alison, and I understand that in its latest budget, Canada has introduced the Wellbeing Framework as one of the initiatives aimed at advancing well-being. So while we would like to welcome this encouraging action, could you kindly summarize what does it mean in the decision-making process? So if you could give us a brief summary, because we still have to listen to our friend from Nepal, and I have seen a very interesting comment from the audience, and I also would like to share it with you. So we have to be very, very good in the time management. Thank you. Please, Alison.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be as brief as I can. I would want to start by clarifying that the approach to well-being, or the well-being approach, isn't really a fundamental shift in the thinking of certainly not of the government that we have right now. And there's been, I think, a long awareness and even a global consensus that traditional measures focused just on, for example, GDP, don't tell the whole story of societal progress. I think Canada's made efforts over the years to try to integrate equality and environmental considerations into account, to take those into account in decision making through processes like gender-based analysis and strategic environmental assessments and so on. And we've followed health and all type approaches similar to some other countries. But the idea of this framework is to help governments just be a bit more deliberate about better integrating these broad dimensions together. And certainly the inspiration for this was global. The fact that other countries are taking similar approaches to incorporating, a broad set of thinking. I won't repeat, but as I said in my introduction, this is really about moving beyond just looking at something like GDP and thinking more holistically, considering a broad range of factors. It's about moving beyond the national averages and focusing on specific groups. And it's about thinking more long-term, focusing on how current decision-making carries implications for future well-being. So to answer your question, in practice, what does this framework really do for us in terms of I would say high-level priority setting? The idea of having an indicators framework helps us assess how Canada's performing against various dimensions of our framework, which include things like health, prosperity, the environment, social cohesion, good governance. And so we can look at Canada's strengths and weaknesses vis-a-vis other countries and trends over time, how different groups are performing, and that helps us identify priorities for new investments that'll advance well-being. And in our recent budget, the kinds of things that aligned with that and that were supported by this kind of thinking included investments in early learning and childcare, investments in making a transition to a net zero economy. So a huge challenge facing our planet and our country to get there. Investments in better outcomes for Indigenous Canadians and investments in mental health supports, among other things. But in addition to that kind of top-down priority, helping us with top-down priority setting, this approach also expands our toolkit to assess individual proposals, all of the things that we're looking at in the budget, and to see how those proposals affect various dimensions of well-being, from indicators relating to things like income security and health, to overall living standards, factors like social cohesion, which we at the finance department tend not to focus on, along with things like good governance and environment and climate change, which we're increasingly taking into account in our decision making. And of course, it means thinking not only about how those impacts would relate to the average Canadian, but to the individual groups, as I've discussed before. And finally, that it kind of means bringing a long-term perspective to our decision making, so that the kind of decisions we make today don't come at the expense of future generations of Canadians and their well-being. So, you can think of this as kind of having a strategy that builds in a bit of a bias towards prevention and resilience. So things like building up of fiscal debt, as well as the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, things like declining rates of trust in society, or even stagnant rates of investment in research and development. These are all kinds of factors that can threaten our long-term well-being. So we need to look at those things and address them over time. So finally, what does this all mean for the average person in Canada? We think it means a greater focus on the kinds of things that matter most to the well-being of people living in Canada. So decisions that we make about the economy aren't just they're not just focused on the economic domain, the prosperity domain. They can affect our health and the environment, and we need to take all these things into account when we make budget decisions and make sure that we have the right mix of investments. And sometimes there's trade-off between policy objectives. So some measures may be really strong in terms of growth, but may come with negative consequences for the environment. So we need to consider both the obvious and intended consequences, but also the unintended outcomes and negative, as well as the positive things that will occur. And in addition to being aware of these trade-offs, we also want this framework to help us identify the win-wins, things that have investments that can, for example, grow our economy while helping us meet our net zero commitments, or investments that advance gender equality while creating jobs. And a great example of this would be our recent investments in early learning and childcare, which has quite high upfront costs, but we think of these investments as investments rather than just costs. Investments in women's economic participation and progress at a time when these have been put at risk by the pandemic, and investments in gender equality, and also a long-term investment in children's outcomes over the life course, which we expect to pay dividends for generations. So I'll stop there. I'm sorry, I'm so excited about some of the things we're doing.
Thank you very much, really, Alison. And it was so good to hear, from a fiscal expert that you should consider health as an investment and not just as a cost. So thank you very much for this. And now I have to just turn to Nepal and ask our colleague Roshan. Being from the health ministry, could you briefly share some aspects of your country's legal framework, plans adopted for well-being, phase to do so with focus on health?
Thank you, Dr. Mia. Earlier, Nepal's framework have adopted a well-being at the center of focus. The new constitution institutionalizes inclusive and participatory democracy with specific civil and human rights, including the right to clean environment and the right to health. Additionally, women's rights to reproductive health and safe delivery services has been guaranteed in the constitution. Similarly, the Ministry of Health and Population has been functioning of the Constitution and the overarching national development framework. The recent Public Health Service Act, its regulation, and the national health policy has been focused to realize the health as a fundamental human right of every citizen in Nepal. In this regard, the Ministry of Health and Population has developed a health service package, a primary care health package to be available for free for everyone in Nepal. This package, equivalent to the national UHC package, is inclusive of physical health issues and mental health issues. Nepal has definitely made significant in the last 2 decades, especially, and certain diseases has been eliminated. The progress toward achieving the health-related Millennium Development Goals has been quite impressive. In the recent years, the ministry has been increasing its priority to mental health and well-being through a national mental health strategy and action plan 2020-2025. This is in line with the Global Action Plan and the SDGs. Similarly, we are also promoting yoga in school initiative to promote psychological well-being of children and adolescents. But the challenge remains. Healthcare is not yet universal. Services at an affordable cost remains a goal rather than an achievement for several groups of Nepalis. The rise in non-communicable diseases and the constant threat of natural disaster require new approaches. There is still large disparity among social groups, gender, and geographical areas. The main challenge at present during this pandemic has been the difficult to change the behavioral patterns of our Nepalese people. One day the behavioral pattern looks good, but the next day they return back to their original behavior. And similarly, the geographical terrain we have from the Himalayas in the north to the plains in the south, this geographical terrain has also made it very difficult to provide our health services, especially in the remotest areas, which include Himalayas sometimes. But our strong 30,000 health workers who are very hardworking and who go up to the grassroots levels, this is our backbone of the health services. And we still think that with this 30,000 health workers and international support that we have been receiving during this pandemic, we hope for brighter days in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, really, for your insights. I think we have heard very, very interesting aspects from all of you. And there is just one question from the chat I don't want to leave out. And you can have half a minute comments, not absolutely necessarily from all of you. And I think it's really important. So could you share a little bit about your experience to work together with the civil society organizations to join forces and better understand the well-being needs of your citizens in the spirit of SDG 17. So if you have any comments on this, very briefly, because we are running out of the time, so please do so. But I think it's really important. Who is going to speak? Yeah, Finland, please.
Thank you. I think Finland has a very long history and a strong culture of working like the state and public administration is very closely working with the civil society, and also civil society has a very long tradition of forming these umbrella organizations, so that when you want to work with the civil society, there are very clear organizations like who to work with. So that's one thing that is really much like from the civil society point of view, very important to organize in a way that helps to help the cooperation and working together. And I think Finland has done well in this matter, and all of the economy of well-being structures and bodies that we have representatives from different sort of civil society organizations. So I think there is a lot to do for the state point of view, but also from the civil society point of view, so that the cooperation functions well. Thanks.
Thanks. Other comments at this stage? Yes, Alison, please.
Yeah, I'll just mention that we are, at this stage, we've learned a lot from certain civil society organizations who have been consulted by us as sort of experts. And we're just still at an early stage. There's a lot of organizations that we haven't not had a chance to talk to yet, but we know there's quite an active interest on the part of our civil society organizations in well-being approaches. So we're hoping we've benefited already, and we're hoping to benefit more in the future.
Thank you very much. Petronella has something to say, please. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was multitasking. Yes, we used to have a very strong civil society, a network of civil society organizations in the country, especially before independence, when the civil society organizations played a very important role in the liberation of our country. After independence, we saw that some of the funding, the external funding, dried up, and a lot of civil society organizations then had a lot of problems to survive and to maintain their wide reach in the country in many different spheres. What we have decided now, because there's always, we work in government, we work very closely together with civil society organizations. It's just that at the moment they are not in all sectors very strongly organized. So in our policies, when we develop a policy or a law or a program in Namibia, it is prescribed that government must consult civil society organizations. So, which is a good thing. But we also realize that we have to invest in them. We rely on them to give our feedback, but we have to invest in them because there is no external funding. And it is even worse now that Namibia is classified as an upper middle income country. They don't get funding. So we have come up with social contracting, where we can contract, the government can contract civil society organizations to carry out certain work to complement government's work and to reach especially hard to reach populations, rural communities, key populations in various sectors who will trust the civil society organizations more. So we are looking into social contracting as a means of strengthening civil society organizations as well as payment for results.
Thank you very much indeed, Petronella. Roshan, I mean, the last comment from you, but please be very brief because...
Thank you, sir. I'll just take 1 minute.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Nepal it's very difficult to imagine the delivery of health services without the civil society, especially in Nepal. They play a very significant role and we acknowledge their work, especially in the remote areas. Although they are funded both nationally and internationally, they do play a very significant role in delivery of our health services. And we take this opportunity to thank them. Without them, it's quite difficult to deliver the health services, especially in the remote part of the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that gives us, closer to the end of our discussion. And my job is, first of all, to thank you very much for the very active participation of the panelists, for all 4 of you. I think we have learned a lot from all of the countries. It was really very, very useful, and I hope that the audience could have learned also a lot. I will not give you a conclusion at this stage because of, the time limits, just to say that this discussion demonstrated that well-being focused policy and economy is not only an exciting and a pioneering vision in the crisis-tired societies. Of course it is, or it could be, but perhaps with their application we can once again get closer to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals at this stage. Of course, we need good politics to achieve this, as one of you have rightly said. And having said that this, I would like to inform you that WHO is currently bringing the global knowledge on well-being together, as it will be the theme for the 10th Global Conference for Health Promotion to be held later this year. We will hear about it now, and I will give the floor now to Dr. Rüdiger Kresch from WHO, whom I introduced at the beginning, who will give us his closing remarks from the session. Rüdiger, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mihaly, and dear colleagues, distinguished delegates. Wow, what a discussion. Saila, when your colleagues approached us to ask how we perhaps could collaborate on this side event, we brainstormed a little bit about what we would expect from such a discussion, but actually you by far exceeded our expectations. Countries like yours, I think, are at the avant-garde of development in terms of acknowledging that it is not only growth, economic growth that matters, but there's many other things that are so important for development, and quality of life and well-being are definitely a part of that. And I think your discussions very clearly showed that also getting out of this crisis that we're currently in, we need to rethink, rebut, and go forward in our thinking of how societal development can be based on well-being. Alison, I was so touched, honestly, by your explanations, how you're introducing well-being in your governance. The way you're doing this, and to do this from a financial point of view, from a fiscal point of view, and see what are the investments and the trade-offs and the return on investments for societies overall, that is spot on. Saila, of course, we know for years we've been working together on health in our policies, on well-being, on quality of life. So it's always a pleasure hearing how Finland, how you're actually taking things forward. And Petronella, the way you're describing how you're now at the moment caring for people during this crisis, and how well-being can help you create that hope that you were talking about. That's, I think, what is required of leaders. That is leadership that in the UN we need to discuss more. What does it take to actually act on those fronts, to execute that sort of leadership, to guide now countries out of this crisis and prepare better for the future? And again, I think that well-being is a seismograph for development, to also understand what the risks for future pandemics might be. We've seen wake-up calls every 5 years in this millennium. And honestly, the wake-up calls were not really listened to. They were not heard. Perhaps this crisis, after the H5N1, the H1N1, and the Ebola crisis, now is a wake-up call for all of us to see that it requires different parameters for development than just economic growth. And you've actually, again, spearheaded this. Roshan, the way you describe how things are moving in Nepal, how with your challenges, but also your opportunities, you're moving on the scale of well-being, is fundamental. And it shows that actually every country can actually move the needle towards well-being wherever you stand, whatever the challenges that you're facing might be, but you, with the lens, this well-being lens, you can actually move the needle forward for all the people. And that is, I think, what really is now so important, that after this crisis, when perhaps or hopefully we see the light at the end of the tunnel, if things go well, if solidarity prevails and not nationalism, if that is true, then we might actually cut the curve. And then it's so important that we are not just going back to where we've been before, but that we are actually looking at how we can move this needle forward for the well-being of people. That will create resilience in societies, and that will then actually protect us more for future pandemics. This is what I really wanted to tell you. And again, thank you all so very much for the way you're looking at these things. I hope that many member states are listening to your examples, because again, it drives peer learning. What you're saying now helps perhaps other countries to also go in this direction. This is what we want to promote during the 10th Global Conference. Mihaly, you've alluded to the 10th Global Conference on Health Promotion, which will focus on well-being. Together with you, colleagues, we will then explore member states' experiences on this pathway. There's other countries that also share highly valuable experiences: New Zealand, Scotland, United Arab Emirates, Iran, many other countries I would need to now list up. But there's a growing base of experience and evidence that basing the development on well-being will actually lead to economic, social, and societal growth as such. So there's many things to learn for all of us. We're at the start of this, despite that obviously well-being has been part of the societal debate for centuries. But now we have political action plans, we have concrete concepts that put the thinking into concrete practice. And so that's what we want to share during the 10th Global Conference at the end of this year, that we hope you will all be able to attend, all that you listened in. So I just want to thank you for this excellent side event and look forward working with you all in pursuing this path of well-being for societies. And WHO has been working on this, as you mentioned, Mihaly. The general program of work talks about this. The way we are organized in WHO is very much linked to well-being. So there's a little bit of also knowledge and experience that we can share from the WHO side on this in the future. So thank you all again very much, and back over to you, Mihaly.
Thank you really, Rüdiger, for your fascinating and fantastic closing remarks. And I just joining, thanking to all participants, to the audience, and also for those who helped to prepare this meeting, from the Finnish Ministry of Health and Social Affairs as well, to all technicians, to all audience. I think it was very, very useful and fruitful, a little bit more than 90 minutes. I'm sorry for running out of the time, but I think it was worthwhile to do so. And again, I hope we will meet you again, if not before, during the 10th Global Conference on Health Promotion in December. And then, of course, you can contribute with your experience. Thank you again so far. So and then have a good day, good evening, good night, depending on your time zone. Again, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. And Saila, thank you, your colleagues. Thank you so much for this whole preparation. It's been a pleasure working with you on this. Thank you so much.